Hi, welcome to High Road. My name's Andrew, and in this video I'm going to be taking a regular B-flat trumpet and converting it into a C trumpet. First of all, please excuse my husky voice. It's not 100% at the moment, so please be patient with me as we get through this video. First of all, about 2 years ago I made a video where I said one of my New Year's resolutions was to convert a B-flat trumpet to a C trumpet. I bought all the gear. I've got all the tools, I've got everything I need to do it. I even have a trumpet to do it with, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. And it's been such a long time, I really need to get this done. If I can get it done by the end of this year, which I have 12 days to do it, then it means I will have completed my New Year's resolution for this year, or at least one of them. The reason I want to do this is because I'm not a trumpet player, not a proper one. I'm just a hobbyist. And because I'm not part of the brass world, I don't need a B-flat trumpet. For those of you who don't know, when you play a B-flat trumpet, when you play a C note on a B-flat trumpet, the sound that comes out is actually a B-flat. So every single note that you play on a B-flat trumpet is actually one tone lower than what you're thinking of musically at the time when you're playing. Now, within the proper brass world, that's normal, right? If you play professionally as a trumpet player, if you play in brass bands, if you're a brass teacher, if you're a brass student, a B-flat trumpet is the standard thing that you play. All the music, all the repertoire, everything is written for B-flat trumpet. And there's traditional reasons for that, which I'm not really going to go into now, but basically it became standardized a long time ago, and that's the way it is now. But I'm not in that world. I like, when I play what I think is a C, it's actually a C. Or if I play a G, it's actually a G. That's what I prefer. So because I'm not bound by any of the normal requirements of the brass world, I can do what I want. Now, a while back, I actually bought myself a very cheap C trumpet on Amazon. This is a plastic trumpet, and it cost me about $130, and I have loved it. The sound is not, well, it's actually pretty close to a real trumpet, but it's not perfect. It doesn't play quite as nicely as a real trumpet, but I have loved having an actual C trumpet that I can practice on. And when I'm reading sheet music, recording, whatever it is that I'm doing, it does what I think it's doing. The notes that I'm playing are the notes that I'm playing. I love it. And because that experience has been so enjoyable for me, it's confirmed that I really do want to be a C trumpet player, if in fact that is a type of trumpet player at all. So what you're looking at here is 3 identical trumpet cases with 3 identical trumpets in them. These are essentially junk trumpets that I got from the school where I work. They're all identical. They're all King 600 models, B-flat trumpets, and they've all got something wrong with them. I'm going to take the worst one. This one here is so bad that the lead pipe it's not even attached anymore. There's so much wrong with this little trumpet that it's going to be a great, I can't even get it back on. It's going to be a great one to test with. Now I should mention that even though I'm going to be showing you how I'm going to do this, this is not a proper how-to video. I'm not really recommending that you do anything or copy anything that I show you because I'm not a professional brass technician. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just having fun with some old broken trumpets, and there's the disclaimer. So because of that, this video is going to go a little bit faster paced than a normal how-to video would, because I'm not going to go into the intricacies of every step. But here's how it's going to work in a nutshell. In order to turn a B-flat trumpet into a C trumpet, you've got to shorten most of the tubing. So in some cases this will involve cutting the tubing, and in other cases it may just involve disassembling the trumpet and swapping some of the tubing parts around, which you'll see later in the video. Once it's finished, I'm also going to silver plate the trumpet, but before I can do all of that, the first step is to take the lacquer off. So that's what I'm going to start with. From my YouTube research, it turned out that most people use a product called Z22 lacquer stripping solution from Fareese Tools. However, this product isn't available in Australia, and Fareese Tools won't ship chemicals like this outside of the USA. So I went to my local Bunnings and got the strongest paint stripper I could find, this stuff. What I didn't know was that this model of trumpet that I'm working on, the King 600, uses a particularly robust type of lacquer called baked enamel. So even after using the strongest chemical available to me, it didn't have much effect. You can see here that after the first application of paint stripper, the lacquer is still mostly intact with some flaky bits starting to emerge. When I tested for continuity with a multimeter, there were only a couple of spots where I could get direct contact with the brass. The rest was still covered in lacquer. After another application of paint stripper, which I left overnight this time, a bit more of the lacquer was coming off, as you can see here, but it still wasn't a lot. You can also see here that the exposed section of brass have tarnished straight away. It looks really bad, but that's just a cosmetic thing and it will polish out later. In the end, it took about a dozen applications of paint stripper and scrubbing to get most of the lacquer off. Well, I've got about 95% of the lacquer off of this trumpet, and it's looking pretty scuffy and tarnished, but that's okay, it's all going to polish up nicely. Here's a section of tubing here I've already kind of had a bit of a go of polishing, and it looks really good. So we can proceed to the next step, which is cutting and modifying the tubes. So the first thing is the lead pipe. I need to cut that down to the length that's going to tune to a C. So I've done some experimenting with one of my other identical trumpets here, and I've discovered that if I put my mouthpiece directly into the end of the tuning slide and adjust it to about that point, the trumpet tunes to a C sharp in open tuning. That's without any valves. So if a normal trumpet with all that length of tubing is B flat, and if this amount of tubing gives me a C sharp, basically I just need to do some maths and work out where 2/3 of that would be, and that's where I make the cut. Well, I've just used some sticky tape to get this measuring tape to stay in place, and it looks like that is roughly going to be the new length of the lead pipe and tuning slide section. Now, if you see there, it basically lines up with where that brace is, so I'm going to use that brace as a bit of a locator to help me take measurements from. And I'm also going to take away, well, I'm going to basically be more aggressive than I need to. I'm going to cut more away than I need to so that I've got wiggle room and I can use the tuning slide to account for any differences in tuning. Okay, so what I figured out here is I can actually leave the top two sections here, the receiver and the tuning slide, intact. Then the bottom two slides will need to be cut, the brace will be moved, the finger rest will be moved, and this section of brace here will be moved as well. And that should do it. I started by using a butane torch to remove the finger rest and the tuning slide receiver from the lead pipe. The first hurdle I encountered was finding out that the tuning slide receiver was actually quite badly damaged from previous repairs, with lots of small holes. Rather than repair these, I decided to just replace this part with one from one of the other trumpets that I have. The first major surgery I did was to shorten the lead pipe by cutting it with a jeweler's saw. Then I used some 220 grit sandpaper and some Scotch-Brite pads to clean up all the tarnished sections that would need to be resoldered later. Alright, so something worth talking about here is how I've managed to get the new shortened length of lead pipe to fit the old end of receiver, because these used to be further apart and it was perfectly tapered so that this part here joined up with this piece, but now they're quite loose fitting. So this is a tip I got off another YouTuber. Basically, if he was doing a trumpet conversion like this, he actually used the edge of this brace as a little shim. So if I bring this receiver right up to the lip of that brace and then place my lead pipe inside, they actually fit together quite snugly, and it keeps all of it braced to the valve casing. Next, I laid out all the pipework on the trumpet to locate my cutting point for the lower tuning slide receiver, marked the spot with calipers, and used a jeweler's saw to make the cut. You can see here that the remaining receiver tube was still attached to that brace, so I used the butane torch to desolder it. However, my attempts to desolder and remove the rest of the brace the same way were unsuccessful. I think this is because the other end of the brace was soldered with silver solder, which has a higher melting point than soft solder. So despite heating this part up until it was glowing red, it just would not let go. So I had to resort to just cutting it off with a hacksaw. But then came another hurdle. The tuning slide wouldn't fit in because, unbeknownst to me, the remaining receiver tubing contained an insert which couldn't be removed. So in the end, I decided to replace this section with the one I'd cut off earlier. I cut the tuning slide down as well, and then laid all the parts back onto the trumpet to check that everything fit before endeavouring to solder the parts back together. Now, I've read that people doing this for the first time, like me, tend to use too much heat and too much solder, and I think that was the case here, yes, because I made quite a mess in places. As you can see, I'm applying liquid flux onto all the joints, which helps to draw the solder in to where you want it to go. And before I soldered the last pieces in place, I made sure that the receiver tubes were lined up properly. At this point, I'd essentially made a C bugle. Next, I cut the third valve slide receivers with the jeweler's saw, and as it turned out, the cut point was right about where one of the braces was located, so I used that as a cutting guide. The next step was to cut down the third valve slide. After that, I repeated the process for the first valve, receivers and slide, and as it turned out, the cut point was once again right alongside a brace, so that's what I used as a cutting guide. What I haven't mentioned up until now is that cutting the tubes with a jeweler's saw was extremely time consuming. I've edited a lot of that out in this video, but it usually took at least an hour or more per tube because the saw teeth kept binding against the tube walls. Maybe I need to use a different kind of blade. Wherever I could, I tried to use my little tube cutter that was much faster. Even if I couldn't use it all the way around, it would do most of the work for me before I switched to the saw. There was now just one slide left to modify, the tiny second valve slide, and this one was absolutely the most difficult because there's so little material to work with. I didn't put a lot of thought into calculating the right length for the tuning. I just cut away as much as I thought I could get away with and hope for the best. When I started to take the slide itself apart, I ran into difficulty desoldering the tubes. I think they were done with silver solder because nothing I did would separate them. That meant that I really had to fabricate brand new parts from the leftover tubes, and in the end this actually worked out really well, and the new slide fit perfectly with about maybe 3 or 4 millimeters of grip. At this point it was literally 11:58 PM on New Year's Eve, and I was happy to declare the trumpet functionally finished, so I decided to put it together and see if it worked. So it's 20 past midnight right now on January the 1st. I finished this just before midnight and I've just assembled it now, and I'd love to give it a little play, but it's so late. I'm going to use a practice mute just so I don't get in trouble. Let's see if it works. It works. It sounds in tune too. Cool. Thanks for watching part 1 of this series. Please join me in part 2 where I finally clean the trumpet up and get it looking beautiful.